Well, let's jump right in here. We've already had a conversation about stuff that we can't get into on the podcast, or we won't get into. I shouldn't say can't. Regarding Mother Earth, and maybe we'll circle back to that when we talk about ayahuasca.
Yeah.
But you've got a new book out.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I'm about halfway through it. I want to talk about how you grew up and kind of what led you down this path, because I don't know if it was, you had parents that meditated. I think in the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about that. There are many thoughts on this, but if you believe in karma, there are many people on this planet that believe in karma. And so the idea in the Bhagavad Gita is that if you did well in a previous life, when you incarnated again, you would be born into parents who already meditated and already were on the path. So you'd be able to leapfrog up a level. Paul Selig's guides teach differently. They teach that there is no karma, because they teach a love that knows no record of wrong. So if you embody Christ consciousness, or however you want to call it, that ultimately God doesn't give a fuck. God loves you no matter what.
Right. It's like love without judgment.
Yeah, exactly. It's the ultimate highest unconditional love would not punish you for mistakes you made in a life where you were doing the best that you could with what you had.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump in. I mean, talk about growing up. What kind of parents did you have? What was life like? Where were you at?
I was in Austin, and basically neither of my parents, no one in my entire family has ever read a philosophy book, has ever meditated, has ever touched. And they didn't even read
To this day.
Yeah.
Damn.
And so no one in any, not one single person in my entire family on either side ever really even read, much less us and my brother, of course, but previous generations. No interest in that. My dad, my parents separated whenever I was 4, and my dad was kind of like this Tarantino movie character, kind of Dallas cowboy, crazy businessman type of fella, heavyset Republican, alpha dog, old school type of guy, always had multiple guns on him at all times. And it's kind of actually a funny hidden talent. Everyone has a secret talent. Mine is that I am a expert marksman, which is the last thing that many people would think. And it's because growing up, anytime I would go visit my dad, all we would do would be shoot handguns and shotguns and rifles. Or after we were done there, we would go pack ammunition at his home, because he had this room in his house and this is in the late 80s, early 90s. So he's on early on that type of thing, but pack ammunition, pack shotgun shells, and then go to the range and just shoot. And he had a whole gun safe full of everything you can imagine. And so, that was, so I am an expert marksman. So when Armageddon comes, that's a good skill to have.
That's a great skill to have.
But anyway, so he very much had this mentality of, unfortunately, I think causally, he had some racism, in him, and had this attitude of like, kill or be killed. And also at the same time, he had this weird, dark, twisted humor about it, where it was all like a good story that actually one of his friends told at his funeral. He died, by the way. One of his friends told at his funeral was that they were hunting in Argentina, and all of his buddies were like on a plane. And one of them, like, they all, of course, were taking like nitroglycerin tablets, because they all had heart conditions, because they all basically just ate steak and drank wine every night and were super stressed and had hypertension. And this is a story I think adequate for your podcast, is that like him and his buddies used to go eat lunch and then go to the bathroom and weigh themselves before, and then go in and then come out and weigh themselves after, and see who could lose the most weight. That was like their competition. Anyway, so they're on this flight, and one of them starts like kind of having like an issue and like kind of passes out. And my dad's like, no, don't. Like, if he died, like, there's nothing we can really do. We're out in this remote area. Like, and I got to get back to Texas. So, like, let's not tell any of the flight attendants. Like, if he's dead, he's dead. Like, if he makes it, he makes it. But I don't want to delay our flight. And, and all his friends like, okay, that's cool. And
everyone agreed.
Yeah. They're like, oh, that's hilarious. Yeah.
We can't save him now.
Yep. And so, anyway, but it's interesting is that, he going through life like that, as a kid, I saw the negative repercussions of that. I saw, like, he literally always had a gun on him, or two. One in his car, he slept with a shotgun under his bed. He always sat with his back to the wall in restaurants. He had no windows on the front of his house. And it's all because he had fun screwing people over, for for a living. And as a little kid, I remember one time him telling me like that's just some of the stuff he was up to at work. And then I went to school and they were like, "What's your father do? What's your father do?" And it's like, "Okay, Cory," in kindergarten or whatever. "What's your father do?" I was like, "He told a guy to go on vacation and then had his office cleared out and put into a warehouse so that whenever he got back, that he would be shocked at the fact that all of his stuff was gone. His office is empty. And then my dad went to Las Vegas." That was like to party. Like, that's what he does for a living, I guess. And so he would tell me like he carried a gun because he never knew what he was going to see when he came around the corner. And he always wanted to be prepared. And, like, it was that old school system of he was buddies with the Dallas chief of police. My understanding was that they gave him a badge just so he could carry his gun wherever he wanted to. And, that was kind of how he did it. And what I learned from that really, like, I just kind of observing it, I don't know, intuitively was that, man, I want the opposite of that because I saw the fear and the anxiousness and like the suffering ultimately. And I wanted to not live my life to where when I go around the corner, I'm scared and have to be prepared of what I might find. I want to go around the corner and be excited of who I might run into.
Yeah.
And I really saw the suffering that way of living created for my brother, for me, for my mom. And so that was a great teacher to me. What's interesting is that he did die, and I actually write about it in the book, is that he did die just kind of out of nowhere and from, heart condition, of course. And it's interesting is that now I've been able to love him more since he's been dead, not because of anything other than my understanding, because everything in our lives, man, is like peace, all that stuff, compassion, it all is perspective and understanding. And the higher view and the more deeply you can understand someone's own narrative, how they've kind of authored their life and the causality, the things in their environment that have caused them to live a certain way, that you can, it's sort of like, you can't beat the saying of how are you going to be mad at a tornado? It's like, it's a tornado, it naturally occurs and it does create destruction, but there's no real use in yelling at a tornado, right?
Or yelling at God for the tornado.
Exactly,
or yelling at Gaia for the tornado.
Yeah. So that was a good teacher for me. And then my mom, she was just doing the best she could with two young boys and working, no college experience and trying to work and put groceries on credit cards and stuff our whole life just so that she could kind of make it. And then that was that. I found because of a lot of that, there was a lot of other stuff, a lot of traumas and things like that, that I experienced. And because of that, I became very kind of retreated into myself when I was younger. And I was always, there's the blank slate idea. I think that we seem to kind of be predisposed to having, as we're born, certain personality traits. Even it could be the genetic switch bank of our brains, or something like that. I was always thinking in kind of far out ways. I remember a distinct first moment of kind of meta awareness I had was whenever I was a little kid. I went on vacation and I went to this hotel, one of those big, massive hotels, like in the Gulf Coast or whatever. And I was there with my mom, my brother, and I remember that my brother had gotten sunburned or something, so he was chilling in the hotel. And my mom was like, "Well, we need to go out and do this." And I was like, "Okay, I'll go with you." So I remember we were driving away, and I looked back at the hotel, and I remember thinking, it's weird that like my brother's in that giant building, in that room, in a single room by himself right now, laying on bed watching TV, and like from the camera of his mind, he's like in this whole other experience and it's in there happening right now, even though I'm in this car driving away from that building. It's so strange. And I just had that kind of spontaneous, effortless sort of awareness of like, wow, we all are living our own camera view of our life. We all have the headset on,
Yeah.
And so I started thinking in those ways, and it actually really led to a lot of challenges because going to a little school, like a daycare whenever I was a kid, they were trying to push some like Christian agendas on the kids there.
How old were you when you had this realization?
I was probably like 6 or something.
Oh shit. Okay. So super early.
Yeah.
Okay.
And going to these little this little daycares and stuff like that, trying to push a Christian agenda. And I remember saying like, I don't think I remember being like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And they were like, would be really angry and they'd punish me and put me in the corner for not, going with it. And they'd be like, well, like, how about this? I'd say, like, how about, if there's a God, then how about the lights in this room will just go out real quick, just as a little high five. And they'd be like, you're in trouble. Get out of here. Go sit in the hallway. You know, it's like, all right, well, this is what life is going to be like. You know, I'm going to think weird shit and I'm going to be forced to go sit in the hallway. But that I started thinking that way kind of early. And as I entered society more, going through the school system, like, that all just got more and more intense because of fighting with teachers. I have this massive issue with authority, hence my self-employment, you know, and all that type of stuff. And life was challenging, like it is for everyone in high school. But I started realizing one day, totally randomly, I overheard this conversation of some people saying, if you could have dinner with like 4 people, living or dead, who would it be? One of those people was Jesus. Another person was Nietzsche. I remember like hearing that and thinking, that's an interesting name. And so as a teenager, I was like walking through a bookstore. I happened to see a book that just said Nietzsche on the back. I was like, there's that name. I'm gonna go check that out. And I remember reading it and I opened up. I was like, oh my God, the first time in my life, this is how I think. It's not like what I think, but it's the math of how my mind works. And I became obsessed, unhealthily so, with reading philosophy. After I soaked all that up, I of course was like, well, okay, well, the Western bookshelf is done. Let's go to the Eastern bookshelf, see what they have. And this is in the early 90s ish, you know, so there's no internet. It was literally like, well, what do they talk about in this book? Who are the names? Who are some of the things? And like, maybe I could just figure something else out. And anyway, so then I started reading and eating Eastern philosophy. And I was like, okay, this is not only how I think, but this is what I think. This is my intuition of operating for the world. And I realized that through reading Eastern philosophy, just kind of autodidactically. And I like to say autodidactically, not because I like to say, like, oh, I figured all this out on my own, I'm awesome. I like to take responsibility for my own idiocy. You know? And so,
explain what autodidactic.
Oh, just someone that teaches themselves things. Okay. Yeah. I like to say, look, I figured all this out on my own. I'm sure there's huge gaps of stuff that I missed. I'm an idiot. I just, I'm doing my best here. And so I realized that my own mind and my inner life was mine. And I had kind of a Viktor Frankl moment of like, no matter what's going on outside of my life, no matter what I'm forced to interact with or the circumstances, my inner life, I have control of that. That is where my freedom lies. You know, you can be in chains and being tortured and whatever, but you can still think whatever you want. And I realized that, okay, if I can undo some of this stuff and I can get some clarity and understand myself, this can become like my sanctuary, right? My inner life can be my sanctuary. And I started meditating just from reading like descriptions of it in like, Zen Buddhist books and stuff like that, like Suzuki and things like that. And I was reading, like, I figured out just kind of intuitively again, I guess, that consciousness was where it was at. Because I started reading psychology and semantics and, things, all neuroscience and all this stuff. Because I just was like, oh, these are all the components. These are the composites that create this thing I'm trying to figure out. And I knew that when I was reading something, it was like discipline. It was like, you hear a fighter, you see, I don't know, I keep getting my ass kicked, but I'm going to go back to the gym, go back to the gym, go back to the gym. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to keep getting my ass kicked until I can actually feel confident and I can push through and turn this corner with, my game. And I was like that with knowledge. I was like, I'm going to keep reading philosophy, keep reading science of the mind, keep doing it, keep doing it. And it was tough. Like, I didn't know what I was reading. I never went to college. I still haven't. And it's like, I'm going to keep reading this 800-page book on semantics until I understand it. And I knew that I was really turning that corner whenever I would read and I would feel high. Like I would read something like some 100-year-old book, on psychology or something like that. And I'd feel stoned afterwards. And I was like, that's my brain expanding. That's like I started realizing that's the edge, that's the map of my consciousness, kind of the horizon is pushing back and I'm getting new territory here. And that became this crazy thing that I started chasing, And so the more I did that, the more I eventually realized, like, oh, it's consciousness that I'm interested in. All this stuff like this, that's the umbrella that all this stuff is under. And I became just obsessed with consciousness. And I realized that the more that I worked on this and worked on this inner life, and it was really out of just like personal sovereignty and safety at first, because I was in a lot of pain. And I realized, like, this pain is lessening. I'm beginning to be able to take control of my thinking, and I'm able to kind of start responding to my life instead of just being caught in this momentum of reaction to this thing and reacting to this thing. And the more I did that, the more I realized, like, oh, wait a second, I'm different now. Like, I'm different than I was last year. And I started comparing the change of like how I felt a year ago to how I felt today. I was like, I'm better. Like, I feel better. I feel more clear-minded. I feel like more positive. And I kept working at it. And I feel, oh, a year later, like, I'm a different person now. And I just realized that you could literally think your way into a better life. And so it all happened on its own. I had the weirdest thing about it was that I never talked to anyone about it because no one in my life, one, would understand it, not in an intellectual way, but just like it was not in their ecosystem of thought.
Yeah.
And two, at that time, like it was not like, I don't know, it would just be seen as weird or something that needed to be handled, and like, for example, whenever I was 14, I I was put in a mental institution for a short time because I was basically just like totally fine. Like I thought I was fine. I did go through a period of only sleeping like an hour a night for a long period of time. But it was because I don't know, my mom was like freaked out by me essentially. And so was my dad. And so they were like, oh, something's wrong. He's a weirdo. And
he couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about, we've covered a lot here. One thing that I've come to realize that you stumbled upon, or maybe you were guided to or directed to, is this idea that whatever tools we have, whether it be meditation, float tanks, some form of stillness, and then into plant medicines and breath work and different things that can shift our state of being, is that it quiets the noise of life.
Right.
And we all have suffering. We all have some form of suffering, even from something as simple as the wanting of things.
Yeah.
Right. And
to be born is to suffer.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. You talked a bit about your dad's suffering. What was your suffering at this point in time growing up? What did you really struggle with?
It was all like complete emotional incompatibility with my own life. I felt anxious because of just my family system. Everything was kind of ruled by fear and threats and manipulation. And growing up in that, it's one of those weird things where, if you grow up rich, you have a materialistic kind of viewpoint of the world. If you grow up in one other way, you get this inherent viewpoint of the world. And I grew up from this way of having just crazy amounts of anxiety and always having to be aware, like, am I being manipulated intellectually or emotionally right now? How is this threat? Like, why am I being threatened? I didn't do anything, And that made me very skeptical of everyone. And feeling loved conditionally, where it's like the switch is flipped on and off. It's like if you're being good, basically not causing a disruption, then you're not in trouble. If you do anything that is not acceptable, then you're in trouble. The love switch is turned off, and now it's punishment time.
Yeah, Domingo Ruiz goes into that quite a bit.
Yeah, right? Yeah, and man, like, so that was. I grew up seeing the world in that way, of being really skeptical, hence my magnetism towards Nietzsche, being like, yeah, that's right, philosophize with a hammer, and just like in insane anxiety too. Like I used to, coming home, I got really into music at the same time as philosophy, and that was like, I became obsessed with that. I would just like play my guitar for like 4 hours a day, and I would read for 4 hours a day, and I would fall asleep with books. I would like get in the bathtub to try and like chill my anxiety and relax a little bit while I was reading. I'd fall asleep. My book would fall I have like the Tibetan Book of the Dead is all crinkled up in my library because, it's like I was just doing this stuff just constantly, obsessively, really obsessively. It was actually unhealthy. I touched a little bit about that in the book too, is that like when you go so into something with such white hot focus, it does have its benefit. But ultimately I realized that is one reason for doing that is ignoring other things either you can't or you're not ready to acknowledge. And for me, it was basically just my heart and mind was not ready at that point. I couldn't plug into it. So anyway, feeling, just extreme anxiety, extreme, almost depersonalization, at that time. And as a teen, I started doing psychedelics a lot, because in the 90s, people were partying in Austin. And that was it was like my own kind of little mental ecosystem that I was in, and just trying to figure it out. And yeah, so it was just working through that anxiety, working through that fear, and trying to build that bridge back to like, okay, it's okay to not be skeptical of everyone. Everyone isn't trying to manipulate you. There isn't a reason to be scared like all the time of like what might happen next. And that's the really damaging thing. And I think all of us experience that to some degree or another, is that you have this kind of unhealthy attachment to, like Bowlby's theory of attachment. It's really fascinating. But whenever you get in this kind of, the idea is that we're supposed to feel rooted and connected to our parents, and that's where the unconditional love is. And that allows us to go out into the world and then test things out. And if things don't go well, we always can go back to home.
Yeah, home base.
Yeah. But if you don't have a good attachment then with your family, then what happens is you get a destructive attachment to where that's no longer safe, but the world isn't safe either. So you basically get locked in this place of like not being able to count on the world and not trusting the world, and not being able to trust the family, and not being able to trust that, the unconditional part of that. And that creates this auto-regulation of your emotional state, because you're like, I'm a singularity human, I'm a singularity person. And if you're okay, Kyle, if you're calm, then I'm calm and I'm happy, because that's what I'm worried about, right? And if that person's sad, then I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm feeling sad because of that, and I need to like work with that. And if that person's anxious, then it makes me anxious, and I got to go like, oh God, we need to work on this together. So you're trying to send out these grappling hooks to try and find that home base and kind of co-regulate with every person that's around you at all times.
Gabor Mate talks a lot about this in a book called Hold On to Your Kids, which I think is phenomenal for all parents out there. But yeah, he talks about that attachment.
Nice.
And when that attachment is broken, either due to the punishment reward system, the conditional love, or to other reasons, your kids will find that elsewhere, and oftentimes they look for that in their friends.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That's exactly what happens. I mean, it was the case for me in high school, where everything you do is predicated upon what you think other people think of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's 100% in not just trying to make friends. Like obviously there are certain skill sets that are really important in life. Jordan Peterson talks about those. Sam Harris talks about those. Like things that you can give to your kids are one of the skill sets. How to make friends is critically important.
Yeah.
It's critically important for them their entire fucking lives.
Right.
Right. But how you go about that makes all the difference in the world, because if your happiness is dependent upon what other people think of you,
right,
you're failing.
Yeah.
At any stage of the game. And you
end up getting into a lot of bad situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Definitely. That's a really important piece of it, is how friends become your family. That's the only place you can find that thing, because, okay, well, this dude has always been cool to me, and we have a good time, and I think we can be connected. And that was how I totally grew up, like with friends as family, because of that reason. Yeah.
So you touched on psychedelics at a young age. When I remember when I was in high school, there was some people, doing mushrooms. I'd go to the park and maybe we were going to smoke some pot. I probably only smoked weed like 3 or 4 times in high school. But my parents, who had done a shit ton of drugs and never told me about it, always just to tell me, don't do drugs, they're bad and they'll ruin your testosterone, you'll suck at football and all that shit. And so
I've never heard that one before. Like, they'll ruin your testosterone.
It'll lower your testosterone. So I was like, oh, okay. I'm reading all the bodybuilder mags. I'm like, all right.
Clearly it was a lie.
It's a total lie. And fuck yeah, I was thinking about that. And the kids, plus it's like Rogan told me, and I'm not trying to name drop, but
Sure.
when we were talking about acid, and he's like, I've never done it before because everybody who's offered it is some fucking hippie who hasn't showered in 40 days and has a beard down to the floor. And he's like, hey man, and I'm like, okay, I get that. Because in high school, that was my experience. When I looked at people who did psychedelics, I thought of them as total druggies, like losers, right? And these weren't like, maybe it was a lot of the skate crowd, that kind of stuff. Sure. And I don't think of skaters as losers, but the appearance to me was these guys aren't getting shit done. And so I avoided it then. But I remember the first time I did it, I think I was 18 or 19. It was at a house party, no intention, just to get high. I was drinking too. And it was for sure I don't believe in bad, like a good experience, bad experience. When you have an experience
There's
and
the
done
saying,
the right sense,
there are no bad trips, only challenging ones.
Yeah, that was for sure the most challenging experience, because I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know at that. Obviously things are dose dependent, but the fact that you're not in control, right? So you can either submit to that and surrender and let go, which is critical in all plant medicines and in life in general,
right?
Or you can fight it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And much of us fight life just as we fight the psychedelic experience, and so fighting that was incredibly challenging. But talk a bit about those early experiences. You mentioned partying and things like that, and I think a lot of kids they instinctively know that they need to get out of their head. They instinctively know that there's something deeper in life.
Yeah.
And so they look to those things, even alcohol, to shift their consciousness, right? Because we all find altered states, whether that's a tribe without plant medicines that uses fucking bullet ants on a sleeve, or anything, or they dance without water for 24 hours till they start to trip. Like, we're looking for altered experiences and altered states of consciousness. What were those first experiences like? Were they, how you experience it now, or how are they different?
I mean, what's funny too is that people might hear you say that we all seek altered states of consciousness, right? And think, I don't know about that, but someone sitting on their couch and eating a pint of ice cream is doing just that. It comes in every possible
the morning
form.
Cup of Joe.
Exactly.
You're trying to shift your consciousness, and it's fucking caffeine's a hell of a drug.
Oh, it's the best one, the most transformative, and. Yeah, so basically, I think that it was, there was a lot of LSD around whenever I was in high school, and I never drank. Like, my friends and I, we never drank. It was just there was just LSD, and basically what happened to me was that I was never going crazy, There were times where I would set up my guitar rig and go over to my friend's house, and we would all, take LSD, and then I would crank it up all the way and have all these effects pedals and just shred and have this giant wall of noise, and they would sit there and lay down and just have this crazy psychedelic train of a sound bath going down. And that was a way to party. But a lot of it was just sitting around talking and thinking about stuff. And I was just very drawn to that, that way of things. And
it's kind of like Jason Silva.
Yeah, exactly. And I would have some of the dumbest / most amazing insights ever, which would be sitting there looking at this bottle on the table and be like, that's not that far away. That's right there, man. And that's it. It sounds dumb, but it's actually amazing, And so some of the real, actual useful things that I can see that unfolded into some real meaningful insights for me was, I was actually just talking about this with Donald Hoffman, is that I was under the influence with some friends, and there was this poster of the Horsehead Nebula, a big gaseous space thing. And I remember looking at it and being like, that looks like Jabba the Hutt wearing a purple wig, and then go leave and come back and be like, that looks like someone reading the storyboards of Armageddon or Apocalypse Now and Godfather 1 and 2 to 3 crickets, or whatever. And it's go back and that's the alligator wearing a hat made of meat. And then waking up the next day and looking at that Horsehead Nebula poster and be like, oh, that just looks like a gaseous star again. And I remember realizing oh, wait a second. Our mind is just this kaleidoscope of impressions. It's not an illusion. It's just an impression. And it's very flexible. And it's that classic kind of visual illusion test thing where it's is it two faces or is it a vase? It's you can see it both ways depending on how you look at it. And kind of from that point on, I started seeing it in 3 ways. It's it's two faces, it's a vase, and it's also two faces and a vase at the same time. And I realized that that's how our perception works. So it was a real breakthrough for me to start understanding that I was making a perception of life, even down to, of course, visually, but even down to my emotional state, the way of thinking and responding to kind of the cyclical feedback I had with my own existential experience was fluid, and it stretched in and out. And it was always changing, always different based upon what was in my body. And that could be natural chemicals or just, daily life or experiences or whatever. So it was very useful and opening in that way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think Ruiz talks about that too in Mastery of Love, how our perception, there's 3 different perceptions in a relationship of 2 people. My perception of my partner,
right,
and what I project onto them to be, their projection of me and what they project onto me, and our projection as a whole of what our relationship is.
That's right.
In together. But in reality, there is me, which is far greater than any interpretation of someone else's perception of me.
Yeah.
And there's her and she's far greater than any interpretation or perception I have of her, and far more than that. And in both directions, right? There's the high self where unlimited growth, unlimited potential, unlimited ability to change and to shift and to become aware. And then the shadow, all the traits that I don't see or don't want to see that can exist there, right? And that's just on a human level.
Yeah.
It's on every other level too.
Totally, man. And that paradigm you just talked about is why it's so silly to try and be cool. You know, it's because like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm being cool right now. It's like, for who and for what? It's like, well, I have this idea of what everyone else thinks is cool, and so I'm going to try and do that. And it's like, well, what are they doing? Well, they're doing what they think everyone else thinks is cool. It's like, well, who is actually cool? People who don't give a shit and do it and be themselves. Well, then what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's like, and if you just
it's not a fake don't give a shit, right?
It's acceptance, man. Like that's people have asked me a lot in life, which is really weird because I don't think I'm like a cool person. But people say like, what is coolness? Like, what is it? I'm like, it's just accepting yourself. It's just being who you are, and it's not and doing it without any attitude, right? It's like that's not cool. That's of course a projection as well, but just like being able to like let go and just be okay with what you are, and that's whenever your originality, because as you mentioned, like we are all by definition, we're all infinite, we're unknown, we can never know all of who we are because we're always experiencing life. So everything, you know, as we experience, as we're having this conversation right now, you and I are both learning new things, we're feeling new things, there's always information flowing in, and so we're infinite. You know, our resonance with life itself creates an infinity within each of us, and that means that each of us are this doorway to infinite possibility and originality, because only you have walked in your footsteps and experienced what you've experienced. Only I have my perspective on life and so forth. And so if you are able to accept that and be yourself and be comfortable with that, which, you know, it does take some work, some undoing, not doing, but undoing, then your originality really can thrive in the world. And that's whenever you get someone like Anthony Bourdain, you get someone like Bill Murray or whoever. These people who everyone's like, oh, wow, they're such an amazing person. It's like, yeah, because they're allowing themselves to be this individual person. And that's what we're all wanting to be ultimately, I think, to begin with.
Yeah. How do you begin to unpack that, the undoing?
The undoing, well, I think that cultivating negative space is really useful. So like meditation is something that's really handy in that. Of course, you know, I think psychedelics have that effect on people because it just kind of gets you out of your camera view of your mind, of that we're all like locked in our first person narrative of experience. And we think that this river of awareness that is arising within us is what there is, in quotes, whenever really it's just this frequency. Like the world outside of our skin is this crazy like radio signal, and our nervous system is like an antenna just tuning in this tiny little piece of it, right? And once you begin to experience that, then you ask, oh, wait a second, I am also have this radio knob on me that's turning all the time, and I'm just dialing in different parts of this giant, you know, frequency. And you begin to realize like, oh, I'm fluid as a person. Like just my consciousness, my way of seeing the world is always changing. And once you begin to recognize that, you can sort of get out of that, I need to stick to this shape and be this thing and be this character and identify my identity as this thing and lock on to all these ideas of who you should be, which honestly, you had no say in for the most part to begin with. Like we're all born and told who we should be, what our lives should be like, what we should do in the world, what our ethics and morals should be before we even hardly know how to talk. You know, our parents are just pounding that stuff into our head. Our society, our cultural reinforcements are just pounding all that stuff into our heads. And we have no say in the matter. And it takes a bit of recognizing that we were programmed, but then to begin to unprogram. And so meditation is another great way to do it because it creates the same amount of internal negative space. You get a little distance from compulsion, the compulsion of being. You know, most people are just living in this long, like just links of chain of reaction. And through meditation, you're able to stop and say, okay, hold on a second. let me be aware of what's arising right now. What am I thinking? And why would I say this to this person? Or what could I say to this person to help them, to create more equanimity and more compassion? Why would I want to make that decision? Maybe there's another way to approach life. Maybe I can approach this whole game in a completely different way. And that space between thinking and arising thoughts and actually executing your thoughts, I actually call that the mindfulness gap, where you can, and that's how you can author your life in a beautiful way, is whenever you have a negative arising thought, we feel like you want to talk shit about somebody, you want to do, something bad or whatever it might be, and bad, of course, is relative, but do something you know is destructive. You can literally just, if you have the negative space in your mind that arises, you can literally just let it go. Throw that shit in the mindfulness gap. Be like, okay, next. Our minds have 40,000 thoughts a day, right? So wait 3 seconds and you'll have another idea. It's not like we're short on, like, this is the problem, is we have too many thoughts. So if you have a bad one, let it go. Another one will be, another good or whatever one will be around the corner before you're even done processing the fact that you let go of the bad one. And it's just it's an amazing way to be able to really shape how you think in the world. And because of the fact that our brains wire themselves through neuroplasticity, repeated habitual behavior, the roadways of our mind actually start growing into a shape to try and help and facilitate that way of thinking. Once you can get into this pattern and this habit of thinking in a positive way, your brain literally grows into a positive way of seeing the world, and your entire perspective starts shifting. That's like one of the things I put in the book, is that we're not our thoughts. We're our thoughts that we put into action. You could think about nasty shit all day, negative shit all day, but as long as what you're aware and you have this awareness, what you're putting into the world and how you're affecting other people is the good part of yourself, the part of you that can touch on love. Even if someone has a horrible internal matrix that, through no fault of their own or through fault of their own, there's all of us have this ember inherently in us, because in order to have negative, there must be a polarity, a balance in all things. And sometimes that's smaller, sometimes that's bigger. But for a battery to have energy, it's got to have a negative and a positive end, or else there's no charge. Each of us have that charge within us. So if you have this tiny pinhole of love or positivity, maybe it's shrouded and protected in armor. If you can listen to that and hear that through the noise of the pain and the negativity, and start choosing to turn to that's where your actions come from. That's how your thoughts, you can let all the negative ones and let those things blaze on and pass, and turn the thoughts that come from that place into action. That's who you are, because that's what other people experience, and that's how you start building what you are in the world.
Yeah, that reminds me of the Native American tale of the two wolves, equally sized, equally matched. Yeah. One's good, one's bad, one's black, one white. And which one wins? Right. It's the one that you feed.
That's right.
And that's exactly it. I think of a lot of these things as no one teaches us this shit when we grow up. No one teaches us that we're not our thoughts. No one teaches us that if we experience a thought that we don't like, we don't have to grab it. Right. And, we talk about going down the rabbit hole with psychedelics, and people that are averse to that oftentimes don't realize they go down the rabbit hole all the fucking time. When you're driving your car, when you're on the shitter and you start spinning out of control in a fucking whirlwind of shitty thoughts, that's right. You've gone down the rabbit hole. You've effectively grabbed on and latched onto something that isn't you, right? Exactly. And that is a state of, it's a state of unawareness, but it's also a state of some form of psychosis. Right. The longer you stay there, right? And I think the more ways we find to quiet that noise and to figure out, like, where is something stemming from, and then to latch onto the thing that we know is best for ourselves, best for our community, best for our families, whatever that thought is that does good for the world. Right. That's how we can be what we wish to see.
Totally. And it's crazy how, if someone even needs a self-centered reason to act in that way, if you start honoring the white wolf inside of you, the gray wolf, then you become known in the ecosystem of your own life as that type of person. And that's how people respond to you. It's like we're all, like, all of our lives, I call this sitcom reality, where all of us have, like, oh, there's Kyle. He's this guy that thinks this way a lot of times and acts like this and dresses and, wears Speedos and stuff. In the sitcom of my life, like, that's what your character is, right? And so I I as an actor, I interact with you as that character so that we'll have a good story. And everyone, that's how everyone treats and kind of understands everyone else. Like, oh, this is this guy's character or this woman's character, and this is who they are. And so people are prepared to engage with you kind of in the cosmic drama, as Hinduism would say, in that way. If you are an asshole, people see you coming and they go, oh God, this guy is always negative. He's an asshole. Let's close off, not interact with him, be skeptical, not give any warmth. If you're a funny person who's always warm and in good spirits and trying to, be cool and whatever, then they see you and they get excited. And they say, hey, there's Kyle. What's up, man? How are you doing? Like, just like we did whenever we, saw each other this morning. And so if you can honor that good part of yourself and start, bringing that to your life, then your world gets better. It's actually can be, kind of solipsistic if you want. It's like your world gets better because everyone around you starts seeing you as someone that they want to be around and they're excited to see. And so as you do your daily walk, the world actually becomes a better place. And as a nice byproduct of that is that you're actually being a good person in the world.
Yeah. It's funny. You think of like the what is the motive? Those kind of things.
Yeah, you can even come at it from a selfish point of view.
It always starts with you, right? Like the idea that you can't truly love someone unless you love yourself.
Right.
It's completely true.
Yeah.
Right. And you can love other people, but it's a different kind of love. And it might even be an attached love or an incorrect love, a love that does hold a record of wrong, a love that does withdraw upon conditional changes, and all those things. But when you do the work on yourself, that allows you to then see the world differently. It allows you to operate differently. It allows you to be better. And the people around you gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about energy on the show, and I don't know, I took over a fitness show.
Right.
And I'm not sure, there's a lot of pro wrestlers and shit like that were on the show before. And I know there's plenty of pro wrestlers that meditate and then are down, but so it's not a knock on pro wrestling. But this idea of energy, like if someone walks into a room and they're a little off or they're fucking fuming, you might be on the lookout for that guy, without fucking saying a word, you would know if you're tuned in, like, I don't know, I get a weird feeling around that person.
Yeah.
Right. And if somebody comes in that you've never met before, but they're fucking glowing and they got a big shit-eating grin on their face and they're laughing and telling stories, you're like, oh, I want to stand by that guy. I want to stand by that girl. Like, what's she saying? Let me go over by her.
Absolutely.
That kind of thing. Right. So we all are drawn to these forces, that are within ourselves. Each of us is our own universe. But as we get in contact with other people, and that's truthfully one of the feelings I have around you. Aubrey introduced me to you. Yeah. He's introduced me to Ted Decker. He's introduced me to Parangi. Dan Engel. There are certain people in this world, when you meet them, you're like, oh shit, I want to talk with that guy more.
Thank you, man.
And I think
that
that's a true testament of the work that you've done.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. And what's crazy too is what you're saying is that if even someone is not interested in, or they hear you say the word energy and they're sort of like, I'm switching off now to something else. That is actually you can take that down to a kind of a scientific level, and also if you think about energy in the body, if a wrestler is listening to this, you've got your body, that's an important part of the system, but the energy in quotes part, that's what's up in your head and in your heart, and those are vital parts to the body. I was talking to Jason Havey one time, the COO of Onnit. We were talking about kind of how I fit into the Onnit world, and he was like, this company is all about nutrition and we've got all the body stuff, but the work you're doing is our head, and this is a really useful thing for you to be involved with us because of that. And you look at the energy in quotes of someone who makes you feel uncomfortable. And I've thought about this a lot because I was very curious, like, why is someone who seems like elevated? What is that? Like, what is the quietness of that person? Alternatively, what is someone who makes you really uncomfortable that you don't even know? Like, you can be on the subway in New York and someone walks in and you're like, oh, that guy has 30 heads in his, in his refrigerator. Let's not make eye contact with him. If you think about it on a biological level, all of us, we're all recognizing like facial expressions, all the different, muscular aspects of the body, how we're holding ourselves. We actually can sense a lot of times how someone's blood pressure is moving, all that stuff. We have a subconscious understanding from an animalistic level of what's going on in someone's body, just on a physical level. And that allows us to understand kind of pre-intellectualization where someone's at. And it's just an ancient part of our brain that's a protection mechanism. Because if you're in the wild, you want to be able to recognize a threat or something, and we recognize it like that because we've had 200,000 years to work on it. And so whenever you see someone who is really, we sense is like, that person seems aggro, like they are feeling that way, and you feel that way for a reason, you should listen to it. What's interesting is that alternatively, whenever you meet someone who you were so kind to say that you feel that way whenever you and I get together, that all that other stuff is gone the other direction. It's like your internal matrix, the muscles in your face, your blood pressure, the focus of your pupils, the way that you engage kind of intuitively with your environment, it's all clearly slower, calmer, more tuned in, and it doesn't have the dissonance and the animal aggression and kind of the frenzy that someone who is in a state of aggression would have. So it's kind of curious how you can find these people who seem their quote unquote energy is really dialed up and tuned in, and it literally is on a physiological level.
Yeah, and I think at basic survival levels, you realize, I can take my guard down.
Right.
And just from there, you realize, there's much more to that, and you start to embody some of that peace, some of that laughter, some of that joy.
Yeah.
And that's infectious,
Totally.
Like we gravitate towards those people because they impact us in a positive way without saying a fucking word.
Yeah.
Just by being in their presence.
Yeah, that's the best kind.
Yeah. Well, shit, brother. Let's talk about your new book. We only got 10 minutes here.
All right.
We'll be in and out. You wrote Now is the Way.
That's right.
And it seems to me that any book with the title Now has impacted me in a very positive way.
Awesome.
Power of Now. And there's another one with Now.
Well, we'll just focus on those
let's just focus on.
Let's just focus
on.
Oh,
yeah. Be Here Now. Ram Dass. Exactly. Those are the two. Thank you, Ryan Zhao. Be Here Now and The Power of Now. Phenomenal books. But talk about your book, Now is the Way.
Yeah. Essentially, I wrote it because of everything we're talking about. People are suffering. Anxiety rates, depression rates, feelings of isolation and distraction are through the roof, and that's because technology has exploded. It's blown right by us in our evolution. And one of the things I put in there is that, our biology is trying to catch up. We have this kind of evolutionary hangover we're dealing with, right? We're trying to catch up with how the modern world has evolved so quickly. And one of the things I put in there is that there are still hunter-gatherer tribes in the Amazon rainforest, while at the same time, Amazon.com will deliver your groceries to your front door in 2 hours. Like, how can those things coexist, right? But it's just because technology has gotten crazy, right? And so the pacing of life has become so much more fast. The amount of kind of attention thieves and the different directions we're pulled in has become so intense that people are really feeling fragmented. They're feeling pulled in all these different directions. And that also maps onto social media, the images and ideas of how people see themselves in the world versus the curated world that we see online and all this stuff. And it doesn't have to be this way, right? We don't have to feel this thing, even though we're getting sucked into that more and more. And it's designed to suck us into it because attention is a new currency. People are making money with your attention online. So algorithmically, at a level that we can't even imagine. It's like there's a thing called computational inference, which is super evil, which is like what Facebook uses, Google, all these algorithms that basically, based upon your behavior and your movements online, they know what you're looking for before you do. And so they serve up an ad that will serve you what you need before you even recognize that you need it. It's like if you're feeling depressed, you go look for sneakers online. That's what makes you feel better. They'll recognize how long you sit on certain photos, what you like, who you interact with, and they're like, this is a pattern of depression. So as they're entering into that state, show them an ad for sneakers. So like before you even get there, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I recognize all these forms of suffering because of my past experience, and that I figured out ways to work through those things and get on the other side of those things. And Now is the Way is the map I use to do that. And being in an interesting position for my podcast, the Astro Hustle, which is that name confuses people, but after it was in the New York Times, it is what it is, right? But it's supposed to be a quadruple entendre for a reason. I want it to be confusing because I do that evil thing that makes you actually think for yourself. That's what I like to do. It's like, what does that mean? What's it mean to me? And so as I started talking about these things over the years of my podcast, just kind of sharing some of my personal experiences and how I got through them, I started getting all this feedback from listeners saying, hey, man, that thing that you said, that actually, not only am I experiencing that too, but that really, like, how you got out of it, that really turned a key in my mind and it helped me get out of it. And as I heard that, I started realizing, oh, wait a second, these aren't just things I experience. These are universal human challenges. Everyone experiences this type of suffering, all this shit, in just a different way or another. But we all go through this, right? So I wanted to create this guide that to help share all this information I knew and I know can help people transform in these universal experiences, and I'm really interested in wiping away all the jargon. And because some of this stuff, because we're dealing with the mind, it's nebulous, right? It's kind of ethereal, and like you work out in the gym, you can measure your bicep and see if you're getting growth or not. But with your mind, you have to. It's a little bit more intangible than that. You have to like stop and pause. And, okay, am I feeling happier? Am I has my life scaled in a good direction? And so, because it's slippery like that, it's so easy to read some similar things on similar topics that are just kind of gobbledygook, that are feel good, kind of positive thinking stuff that don't really convert to actual real change. And so I like things that are functional. I like things that you can really feel. And so I made it all crystal clear and just simple. And I spent a lot of time taking kind of a lead from some of people who inspire me to break down these huge ideas into single sentences, things that are like, here's all this stuff just parsed out in the most crystal clear way where anyone can understand it and really use it to transform the way that they're thinking and the way that they're living, and stop kind of reacting to their life and start responding to it and begin to author their future and make the changes they want. Another different thing, what makes it, people ask me, the subtitle is an unconventional approach to modern mindfulness. It's modern because I'm talking about it and what it means to be a person living in the modern world today. A lot of these great books, the ones that you mentioned, those are written 40 or 50 years ago, And so it's like they apply to that world, and they still hold timeless truths, but talking about these things in a modern perspective from a modern mind, from my age group, our generation, and being able to really connect them and communicate them in a way that people living today can understand is really important. The other thing that makes it, unconventional is I really built a bridge from knowing to doing. Because a lot of the, books that talk about things like this, like, oh, well, here's all these ideas, go enjoy. It's like, well, no, that's cool. That's great. But the piece that's missing is like, how do you convert that into your life? And in some ways, I almost modeled my book like a business book or like a strategy book. And it really, it is modeled in that way, because I took it like it's modeled. The sections are now, which describes the present moment. Like, what is presence? Again, it's one of those weird kind of slippery things to define. It really talks about it, gets someone to experience it, feel the wow of now, right now in the moment. The next section is there, which talks about how we get lost, helps you identify the ways that you can get snared up and go down these bad rabbit holes in your life that pull you away from yourself. The here section is how you reel yourself back in. Whenever you do get lost and you do get into this pattern of bad behavior and just feeling negative and whatever, how can you reel yourself back in, pull yourself back to the present, and start taking control and get back to that peace, get back to that self-awareness, and start really authoring your life again. And then the how section is where it really kicks off into action. That's two parts. One is called 12 Ways to Now, which are 12 guiding principles that if you even inserted one of them into your daily being, things would change. And I even say in there, like, don't do all these at once. Kind of spend time, introduce these new things, try these things out. And it can be, there's simple things that are elaborated upon, like, don't let your past keep you from your future. So many people identify with what they were, and it keeps them from being who they are today and prevents them from being who they can be in the future. And being lost in this idea of yourself won't allow you to enjoy the abundance of what you're experiencing right now, Even another example from 12 Ways to Now is like, try new things that challenge you. Because as we go through life, we kind of learn what we like, we learn what's comfortable, and that's great. But what happens is that we get a little too comfortable with that stuff, and that part of our brain that needs to snap on and identify and assess something new gets lazy. It starts to kind of atrophy. And so eat weird stuff, travel to weird places, meet new people, talk to different things, read a different book on a different topic, get into try a different kind of music, whatever it is. Keep trying new things in your life, add new things to your day, because that brings you right to the present. Because your brain, like if you had never been, and if you never traveled to an Asian country before and you go to Shanghai, like you better believe you're going to be in the present moment. You're going to be like, oh God, how do I get to my hotel? How do I talk? How do I order lunch? Like, what do I do? How do I cross the street? Because your brain kicks on and it goes, okay, cut away all that, the illusions of the future or the past, get right now and deal with what's right in front of you. So in a smaller way, you can do that every day by just kind of engaging with new information. So then the second part to the how section is called On Meditation, which I really took a cue from Stephen King's On Writing. That's like kind of a high five to him, that title is. Because he doesn't tell you how to write in that book. He talks about writing and he sets you up to actually write for yourself. And I feel like there's so many words have been written about meditation that kind of make it more challenging for people to get into it, because it's like trying to describe your own first person experience. You can't do it, man. The only thing you can do is set someone up a good scaffolding and set up a way for them to try it themselves, because it's the only way you're going to experience it. And I feel like the more that you color what that experience should be like, the harder it's going to be for someone to get to their own authentic connection with it.
It's like telling somebody the exact details of your psychedelic experience with this particular medicine that they're about to do for the very first time. And then you just set a tone for what their expectation is, rather than giving them guidelines that help them get to a place where they can have their own experience.
Totally. It's like, go have my dream. It's like, I can't.
You lay down this way, you go to bed at this time, you take this tea at night.
Yeah. So that's it, man. That's the whole book pretty much from top to bottom. And it was crazy. I wrote, and I'm learning this is a bit more common, but it's because of, part of it is my insane tenacity and drive to just do the best that I can. And another big part of it, honestly, is just my immense respect and integrity I have for humans and for people and for what I'm trying to do. Is that I wrote 3 manuscripts, because I thought, the first one, it's like, well, I've never written in this long a form before. And I wrote it, 50,000 words. Like, well, that's done. Let's delete that and start over and try again. I just started again from scratch. And I was like, oh, now I see the voice coming through. Now I'm figuring out how to connect my mind and my heart and my thoughts and all this stuff. And when I got done with that one, I was like, well, that's better, but now I kind of was like seeing what I could get away with almost, and now I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm glad I got that kind of like bratty, like, hey, I understand the mechanics of writing, and I can articulate weird ideas out of my system. Let's move that away and let's really drop into the heart and just let it all come out in just that right way, where it's like us sitting down right here. And that's I think another fresh part of it is like, as I said, I have so much respect for the human experience, because I know what all that shit feels like. I've been through it. And I'm still going through it. We all are. And I really have a deep, deep respect for it. And so I made it like a conversation. It's like, I want it to be like, we're going to sit down and just talk about this shit. Because that's really all writing is, right? It's like, it's this psychic transmission that, like, the book, the pages are like a mirror. And it's like, you have this idea in your brain that just bounces off and goes into someone else's head, And so just made it like a conversation,
I love it, brother.
Yeah.
Well, we'll link to your book in the show notes. We'll link to the Astral Hustle in the show notes. Listen, if you haven't already. I'm sure people are aware of you just from Aubrey's podcast, and I've been on yours before in the past. Where can people find you online?
Cory-Allen.com, and Hey Cory Allen is my social media on all platforms.
Awesome, brother. Well, we'll definitely have you back on. It's been amazing having you. Thank you so much.